Good morning. We are about to do an Algebra 1 lesson. And I'm going to get things set up and wait for a few people to join. This is Algebra 1 for 6th and 7th periods. Hey Tyler. Good morning. Hey Blake. Thank you. I hope you're well too. Are y'all ready to learn? Have you been doing your IXL? Alright, I'm going to get started in just a second. I'm going to move things around. Make sure y'all can see everything. Alright, and then I can move that, so y'all can see the bottom once we get there. Okay, today in Algebra 1 we are going to be adding and subtracting radicals. This lesson is easier than the multiplication lesson. As long as you know how to simplify a square root, this should be pretty easy for you. Let me find my pen that works. Once again, I'm going to go through this. I don't see your comments until, a minute or so after you've made them. So this isn't the best question and answer mode, but after I do this lesson, if any of you would like some one-on-one instruction through Skype or Teams on a video call, I can do that. So you just can leave a comment on this if you need a little more help with it, and we can work on getting a video call together. I do think that once I finish these lessons, that you should be able to replay the video and stop it when you don't understand something and look at it and try to figure it out. And then if that doesn't work and when you practice your IXL, if you still don't get it, let me know and we'll do some one-on-one through a video call. All right, y'all ready? I think it's clear today. Let's just hope and pray that it stays clear. No Wi-Fi problems. All right, we are going to add and subtract radicals, but the first thing we need to do is review what we've already done. And so I've written some problems down right here that's going to just review simplifying with numbers and then simplifying with variables and then multiplying. That's the lessons that we've done so far in square roots. So right here we have the square root of 45. And if you simplify the square root of 45, remember what you're looking for are the perfect squares that divide into 45 evenly. And I gave you that list of perfect squares that I want you to know from memory in lesson 1. So if you don't remember those, go back and look in that video and then write those down. So I'm going to come out beside the square root of 45, and I'm going to factor 45 as 9 times 5. Y'all know why I chose those factors? Because there's other factors of 45. But I chose these two because 9 is a perfect square. One of the factors has to be a perfect square. So then you take the square root of 9, and that comes outside the square root as 3. And then you're left with your 5 on the inside. So we did that in lesson 1. And then in lesson 2, hang on just a second. I got to tell my daughters to turn something down. All right, sorry about that. Square root of x to the 5th. We want to factor that one. Remember, you can't have an exponent on any variable inside the square root. You have to simplify it if you do. So we simplify the square root of x to the 5th by dropping the exponent down to the even number just below this when we factor it. So it's going to be the square root of x to the 4th times x. And then once you have factored it, you take the square root of x to the 4th by halving the exponent, and it comes out as x to the 2nd, and then you're left with your square root of x on the inside. So x to the 2nd on the square root of x is your answer. So that was lessons 1 and 2. And then the last lesson we did was multiplying radicals. When you multiply radicals, you just multiply the numbers that are under the square roots together. So 10 times 5 is 50, so you get the square root of 50. And then you simplify that like we did up here in review problem 1. When you factor the square root of 50, the perfect square that's a factor of 50 is 25. So that's 25 times 2. And then you take the square root of 25, which is 5. I'll write it underneath. So I'm going to mark the 25 out, take the square root of it, and it's 5. And you're left with your 2 inside the square root. So 5 on the square root of 2 is your answer. That's just a little review. Okay, so now on to our new lesson. I was just looking to see who joined. Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's a beautiful day today. Let's learn some algebra. Okay, so today's lesson, add or subtract radicals. Now, this rule is important. When you multiply, like back up here in this review, when you multiply, your numbers under the radical, of course, don't have to be the same. You just multiply them. But when you're adding and subtracting, this rule tells you something very important. You can only add or subtract radicals if they have the same exact thing under the square root symbol. So, and I wrote these two down to show you the difference. On this problem, 3 on the square root of 2 plus 5 on the square root of 2. Notice under the square root, they both have 2's. That means you can add or subtract those. And all you do is add the numbers in front. 3 plus 5 is 8. And you leave your square root of 2. Do not add those numbers. So you get 8 on the square root of 2. An easier way to think of it is it's like you have 3 of something and you have 5 more of something. That means you've got 8 of that thing. All right? Now, on this one, if you look at this problem, 2 on the square root of 3 plus 5 on the square root of 2, you can't add or subtract those because the 3 and the 2 are different. They don't match. So you can't simplify that. I don't know if IXL would give you any of those. If they read the directions, though, when you're working your problems, it will probably tell you something like just enter the same exact thing in as your problem if you have numbers that don't match under there, because you can't simplify those. All right, y'all good with that? Let's move on now to our examples. And we're going to start out with some really super easy problems. Y'all can go through these problems so quickly on IXL. So look at example 1. Example 1 says simplify. And if you'll look at part A, It says 6 on the square root of 2 minus 4 on the square root of 2. Notice first that the numbers under the 6, and you subtract the 4. You just work with those numbers in front, and you leave your square root of 2. And so 6 minus 4 is 2, so your answer is 2 on the square root of 2. Now this step right here that I showed, I'm just showing those on these first 2 examples. You don't have to show that work. I'm just showing you in case you need to look back to see how I got the answer. We subtracted 6 and 4. Part B. The only thing on these problems that you've got to be concerned with are the positives and negatives, because I know negative signs sometimes throw you off, but use your calculators. Don't miss these because of a sign. You've got negative 10 on the square root of 5 minus 9 on the square root of 5. So again, these numbers under the radical are the same, which means you can simplify these. You've got negative 10, and then you've got minus 9. Just keep that sign with the 9. And once you do negative 10 minus 9, you just write your square root of 5 down. Remember, if you've got a negative and you're subtracting a number, you're going to get more negative. So really what you're doing is adding those 2 numbers and leaving your negative sign. So that's going to be negative 19 on the square root of 5. Isn't that easy? I believe y'all have I think you can get all the way up to probably in the 30s on your SMART score with problems just like this. Okay, part C. Negative 15 on the square root of 6 plus the square root of 6. Now this square root of 6 does not have a number in front of it. It's just like when you have a variable with no number in front of it, it's understood to have a 1. So the square root of 6 is the same thing as 1 on the square root of 6. So you've got your negative 15 plus the number in front here is 1. And you just work that out and then put your square root of 6. So negative 15 plus 1, you have to subtract them because the signs are different. Use the sign of the largest number and you get negative 14 on the square root of 6. And that is your answer. Easy peasy. All right, D. Again, we have the square root of 3 without a number in front. So remember, that's a 1 in front of it. So you're going to have 1 plus 12. And then you just put your square root of 3 down. So that's 13 on the square root of 3. And that is your answer. Everybody good with that? Okay, can y'all give me a thumbs up to let me know that you're okay with it? Awkward silence. Oh, there's some likes. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on now to example 2. Of course, just like always, algebra doesn't stay this easy. There's the next example, you're going to have to actually do a little more work than this. But I wanted to start out with these easy ones so you'll get the whole concept. All right, now example 2. If you will look at example 2, notice you have negative 4 on the square root of 5 plus 2 on the square root of 45. So notice the numbers are not the same in here. But you can't just say that it can't be simplified, because this 45 right here has a perfect square that's a factor. You have to simplify this before you know if you can add these or not. So this 5 has no perfect square factor, so that one's pretty much done. This 45, though, and that is a 45. It's kind of hard to tell what that 5 is, but that's a 45. That can be divided by 9. So you've got to simplify this because you've got to pull that perfect square factor out. So what I'm going to do to work these is just bring down your -4 on the square root of 5. And then we've got to work on simplifying this second radical. So plus, go ahead and put your 2 down. And then we're going to factor 45 as 9 times 5. I hope everybody understands why I chose 9 times 5, because 9 is a perfect square. And now we want to take the square root of 9. Now when we do, let me go ahead and rewrite the rest of this. Leave your 2. But behind the 2, we're going to put a multiplication sign, because we've got to multiply the 2 by whatever we bring out from this 9. So when you take the square root of 9, it comes out as a 3. And then you're left with your 5 on the inside. So now we've got to multiply 2 times 3. So we're going to have -4 on the square root of 5 plus 6 on the square root of 5. Now look, they're the same number under the radical, which is what all of your IXL problems will end up, I think, being able to, once you simplify them, be able to add them. So -4 on the square root of 5 plus 6 on the square root of 5. -4 plus 6 is +2, so you get 2 on the square root of 5. So that's not bad. As long as you know how to do lesson 1 where you simplify the square roots, then this is going to be good for you. You could probably do this lesson a lot faster than you can do the multiplication lesson. All right, look at the next one. -3 on the square root of 2 minus 4 on the square root of 8. So once again, notice the numbers aren't the same. 2, there's no perfect square factor we can pull out, but 8 has a perfect square factor. So we have to simplify that. So you're going to have -3 on the square root of 2 minus 4, and then we're going to put the square root. And then you've got to factor 8. The perfect square that divides into 8 is 4, because 8 is 4 times 2. Okay, so keep working. -3 on the square root of 2 minus 4. And now we're going to multiply by the square root of 4. So I'm going to mark this 4 out, and the square root of 4 is 2. So that comes on the outside. And then we're left with the other 2 on the inside. So we have -3 on the square root of 2 minus 8. 4 times 2 is 8 on the square root of 2. And so now we just have to, since we have matching numbers under the radical, we just add these two numbers. -3 minus 8 is -11 on the square root of 2. And really, these problems don't change in difficulty level. Maybe the number that you have to simplify under the radical is a little bit bigger, but that's the only thing. So you're going to be good on this lesson as long as you can simplify radicals, because the adding and subtracting, the new part, is easy. Example 4. 7 on the square root of 5 minus 8 on the square root of 80. I just looked at your comment, Blake. Yes, this is easy. It really is. So y'all should do very well on this one. You could probably even get up to 100 on your IXL lesson and get a few bonus points. 7 on the square root of 5 minus 8 on the square root of 80. So we have 7 on the square root of 5 minus 8. And then simplify the square root of 80. I'm going to give y'all a minute, or a second, not a minute, maybe a little bit more than a second, to try to figure out what the perfect square factor is that goes into 80. And it's higher than 4, because you have to use the highest one. The largest perfect square that goes into 80. Do 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 do. Y'all probably don't know what that is, but that's the Jeopardy theme song when you're waiting on an answer. My daughter's laughing at me. She's embarrassed. Okay. The square root of 80. The largest perfect square factor that goes into 80 is 16. So that's going to be 16 times 5. 16 times 5 is 80. So now, the easy part. 7 on the square root of 5 minus 8. And then we got to multiply 8 by the square root of 16, which is 4. And then you leave your 5 under the square root. So that's going to be 7 on the square root of 5 minus 32 on the square root of 5. And then 7 minus 32. 7 minus 32 is going to be negative, what? What is that? 7 minus 32 is negative 25 on the square root of 5. And there is your answer. And we have one more. If you have paper and pencil, write this down and see if you can do this one. I'll give you just a second or 2 or 3 to see if you can work that one. While you're working it, I'm going to be working it. Don't cheat. Don't look. Okay, let's see. Did anyone get it right? I'm going to go back and talk through it now in case you didn't get it right. First thing we had to do is simplify the square root of 140. Now, when I look over here at 35, I know 35 is 7 times 5, but that's not going to matter with square roots because 7 nor 5 are perfect squares. So we leave 35 the way it is. A good helpful hint, if we're simplifying the square root of 140, most likely one of the leftover factors is going to match this one. So most likely 140 can be divided by 35. And that's what I did. And when I divided 140 by 35, I got 4. So that's my perfect square factor. It worked perfectly. 4 times 35 is 140. Then you take the square root of 4, which is 2. And 2 times negative 10 is negative 20. So you get negative 20 on the square root of 35 minus 1 on the square root of 35. Remember, negative 20 minus 1 is negative 21. So you get negative 21 on the square root of 35. And that's all there is to this lesson. You're going to have some, like example 1, where you don't have to simplify. You just go ahead and add or subtract the numbers in front of the square root. And then you'll have some like this, and they're going to be all mixed in together. Your assignment is IXL, Algebra 1, EE5. Get a SMART score of 80. As always, and this continues, if you get your SMART score on any of these up to 100, that'll be some bonus points. And I'm not even sure how everything is going to be counting. I imagine it'll be pretty much like it was, which means that these lessons will be 10 bonus points for each one you get to 100. All right, I hope everyone understood everything. If I were you, I would go ahead and get all my IXL lessons done. Now, you should have EE1, EE3. No, wait, I'm sorry. Scratch that. EE1, EE2, EE4, EE5. Those are your 4 new required lessons. And if I were you, I would go ahead and get started on this one while it's fresh on your mind. Try to finish it. And then work on the others. You have until Sunday night at midnight to get all 4 of those lessons completed. And then Monday, we will start with a quiz. I'm going to send you a quiz through Teams. It'll just be a real simple quiz on those 4 lessons. And you won't have any new lesson on Monday. It's just going to be a quiz that I'll send you through Teams. And then Tuesday, we'll get started on our next lesson. I hope y'all have a great day. Do your IXL and enjoy the sunshine. Bye.